Marcus sat in the comfortable chair and looked around the waiting area. The space was designed to impress visitors. Expensive furniture, fresh flowers on the side table, and magazines about business and technology were spread out neatly. Everything looked clean and organized. Through the glass wall, he could see the busy office beyond. People moved around with purpose, carrying folders and coffee cups. At exactly 10 o'clock, Marcus heard voices coming from somewhere near the reception desk. The sound was not loud, but in the quiet waiting area, it carried clearly. He looked up and saw two people standing about 20 feet away, partially hidden by a wall but visible through a doorway. They wore professional clothes and badge lanyards around their necks. One was a man in his early 30s with blonde hair styled with too much gel. He wore an expensive-looking suit and checked his phone constantly. The other was a woman about the same age with dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She had bright red lipstick and carried a tablet computer under her arm. They stood close together, talking in voices they probably thought were private. Marcus could hear every word. "So this is the 10 o'clock?" the man said, glancing at a paper in his hand. "Marcus Thompson?" "Yeah," the woman replied, looking at her tablet. "Another one of these diversity hire interviews. You know how it goes. HR makes us check the box, show that we're interviewing people of all backgrounds." She made air quotes with her fingers when she said the words, diversity hire. The man laughed quietly. His resume probably looks better than he actually is. These things always sound impressive on paper. I give it 10 minutes before we wrap this up and move on with our real work. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair. But he did not move. He did not stand up. He did not make a sound. He had learned long ago that reacting with anger in these situations only made things worse. People would call him aggressive or threatening. They would use his reaction as an excuse to dismiss him further. So he sat still and listened, his face calm even though his heart pounded in his chest. "Did you see what he's wearing in the security camera?" the woman asked, pointing at her tablet screen. "Very trying too hard energy. Like he borrowed someone's suit for the day." The man leaned over to look at the screen and smirked. "Oh wow, yeah. That's definitely a first time in professional clothes situation. Probably thought this was his big break or something." They both laughed. The sound made Marcus's stomach turn. He glanced toward Amy at the reception desk. She was watching the two people with a troubled expression on her face. Her eyes moved to Marcus, and he saw something in her look. Sympathy, embarrassment, maybe even shame, but she said nothing. She looked down at her computer screen and typed something, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. The man checked his watch. "All right, I guess we should get this over with. Standard questions, nothing too complicated. We don't want to make him feel bad, right?" His tone was mocking, like he found the whole thing amusing. "Right," the woman agreed. "We'll be nice and encouraging. Pat him on the head and send him on his way. Then we can get back to the candidates who actually matter." "Exactly. Hey, maybe we'll get lucky and he'll be one of those nervous types who ends the interview early himself. Save us some time." They walked away from the doorway, heading deeper into the office. Their voices faded, but their words stayed with Marcus. He sat in that chair, looking at the city view through the windows, and felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders. It was the weight of low expectations. The weight of being prejudged. The weight of knowing that no matter what he achieved or how hard he worked, some people would always see him as less than. Marcus thought about his daughter and son at home. He thought about all the times he would have to teach them about moments like this. How to keep their dignity when others tried to take it away. How to stay calm when anger would be justified. How to prove themselves over and over again, even when they should not have to. He took a slow breath and straightened his tie. He would not let these people see his hurt or anger. He would walk into that interview room with his head high. He would answer their questions with intelligence and professionalism. And he would remember every single word they said, every dismissive look, every condescending tone. Amy appeared beside his chair, making him look up. Her face was pale and her eyes were apologetic. "Mr. Thompson," she said quietly, "I'm so sorry. I want you to know that not everyone here thinks like that. Some of us actually care about treating people with respect." Marcus looked at her and saw genuine remorse in her expression.
He gave her a small, sad smile.
"Thank you, Amy. I appreciate you saying that. But you don't need to apologize for them. Their behavior is their responsibility, not yours." Amy nodded, her eyes glistening slightly. "They'll be ready for you in just a minute." The interview room is down that hallway, third door on the right. I'll walk you there. Thank you, Marcus said, standing up and picking up his portfolio. As they walked down the hallway, Marcus noticed the photos on the walls. They showed the company's history, its founders, and its achievements. Every single face in those photos was white. Every celebration, every award ceremony, every group picture showed the same lack of diversity. It told him everything he needed to know about this company's real values, despite whatever was written on their website about inclusion and equal opportunity. Amy stopped at a door with a small window in it. Through the glass, Marcus could see the man and woman from earlier. They sat at a conference table, looking at their phones and papers. Neither one looked particularly interested or engaged. "This is it," Amy said softly. "Good luck, Mr. Thompson, I truly mean that." Marcus looked at her and saw something in her eyes. It was the look of someone who had seen too much and stayed quiet too long. Someone who was tired of watching injustice happen but did not know how to stop it. "Amy," Marcus said gently, "never apologize for standing up for what's right, and never feel bad about speaking the truth when you see something wrong." She looked confused, but before she could respond, the door opened. The man stood there with a fake smile plastered across his face. It was so different from the smirking expression Marcus had seen minutes earlier. "Marcus Thompson?" the man said, extending his hand. His voice was cheerful and professional, like he was greeting an honored guest. "I'm Brad Mitchell, senior recruiter here at Tech Forward. Please come in. We're excited to meet with you today." Marcus shook his hand firmly, looking Brad directly in the eyes. "Thank you for having me," he said calmly. He walked into the interview room and the door closed behind him. The woman stood up from her seat and smiled just as falsely as Brad had. "Hi, Marcus. I'm Jessica Chen, Brad's colleague. Please have a seat." She gestured to a chair across the table from them. Marcus sat down, placed his portfolio on the table, and folded his hands. He looked at both of them with a neutral expression, giving nothing away. Inside, though, his mind was working. He was already forming his evaluation of this company. He was already planning what would happen next. Brad and Jessica settled into their chairs and opened their folders. They had papers in front of them that Marcus recognized as copies of his resume. But he noticed something. The pages looked barely touched. No highlights, no notes in the margins, no signs that they had actually studied his background. "So, Marcus," Brad began, leaning back in his chair like they were just having a casual chat, "why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?" Marcus looked at Brad and Jessica across the table. Their fake smiles stayed frozen on their faces. He could feel the condescension radiating from them like heat from a fire. But he kept his expression neutral and professional. He had dealt with people like this before, many times before. "Of course," Marcus said calmly. "I have 12 years of experience in technology and software development. I started as a junior programmer and worked my way through various positions. I earned my MBA from Stanford University while working full-time. Currently, I focus on technology leadership and strategic planning." Jessica barely looked up from her tablet. She was scrolling through something, clearly not paying attention. Brad nodded in a way that seemed automatic, like he was nodding to be polite, but not actually listening to the words. "Stanford? That's great," Brad said with a tone that suggested he did not think it was great at all. "You know, they have wonderful programs for helping underrepresented students get into top schools. Affirmative action and diversity initiatives really open doors, don't they?" The statement hung in the air like poison. Marcus felt it settle over him, but his expression did not change. He knew exactly what Brad was implying, that Marcus had not earned his place at Stanford, that he got in because of his race, not his intelligence or hard work, that his achievements were somehow less legitimate than those of other people. "Stanford accepted me based on my academic record and test scores," Marcus replied evenly. "I graduated with honors while working full-time and supporting a family. The program was challenging, but I was prepared for it." Brad made a small sound that was almost a laugh. Sure. I'm just saying those programs are wonderful. They give people opportunities they might not otherwise have. Nothing wrong with that." Jessica finally looked up from her tablet. "So Marcus, are you comfortable working with technology? I mean, really working with it? This position involves a lot of technical understanding." Marcus blinked slowly. The question was absurd. His resume clearly showed 12 years in technology. It listed programming languages, systems he had built, and technical papers he had published. But here was this woman asking if he was comfortable with technology, like he had wandered in off the street with no experience. "I'm very comfortable with technology," Marcus said patiently. "I've worked with multiple programming languages including Python, Java, C++, and JavaScript. I've led development teams on complex software projects. I've designed systems that handle millions of users. I've also published research papers on artificial intelligence and machine learning." Jessica said, but her tone suggested she did not believe him. She tapped something on her tablet and continued. "And what about working in corporate environments? Can you handle the pressure? Sometimes these settings can be very demanding and fast-paced. It's not for everyone." Marcus felt a flash of anger but pushed it down. She was asking him, someone who ran technology operations for a major company, if he could handle corporate pressure. It was insulting beyond measure, but he answered professionally. "I've worked in corporate environments for my entire career," he said. "I understand the demands and expectations. I've managed teams, handled crisis situations, met tight deadlines, and delivered results consistently." Brad leaned forward and folded his hands on the table. "Here's the thing, Marcus. We want to be straight with you. This is a senior position. It requires someone who can interact with high-level executives, present to boards, make strategic decisions. These are people with very high standards and expectations. Do you really think you have that kind of experience?" The question was designed to make Marcus doubt himself, to make him feel small and unprepared. Brad's tone carried the clear message that he did not believe Marcus belonged in rooms with important people, that somehow Marcus was not capable of handling serious responsibility. Marcus reached into his portfolio and pulled out a sheet of paper. It was a list of speaking engagements he had done. Major technology conferences, university lectures, corporate board presentations. He slid it across the table toward Brad. "I've presented to Fortune 500 CEOs, university presidents, and government officials," Marcus said calmly. "I've spoken at international conferences with audiences of thousands. I've advised boards on technology strategy and digital transformation. I'm comfortable in any professional setting." Brad glanced at the paper for maybe 2 seconds before pushing it back toward Marcus. "That's great," he said dismissively, "but conference speaking is different from day-to-day business relationships. We need someone who can really connect with our clients, understand their needs at a deep level." Jessica's phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up and started reading a text message right in the middle of the interview. She smiled at whatever she was reading and typed a response. She did not apologize or even acknowledge that she was being incredibly rude. Marcus watched this and said nothing. He was making mental notes of everything. Every dismissive gesture, every condescending question, every sign of disrespect. These would all matter later. "Tell me about your technical skills," Brad continued. "I mean your actual hands-on skills. Can you write code, or do you just manage people who write code?" The question revealed how little Brad had actually read of Marcus's resume. The very first page listed his technical certifications and programming experience, but Brad had not bothered to read it. He had already decided Marcus was not qualified before the interview even started. "I still write code regularly," Marcus answered. "I believe leaders in technology should stay current with actual development work. I contribute to projects, review code, and mentor junior developers. I have active accounts on GitHub where you can see my contributions to various open source projects." "Open source," Jessica said, looking up from her phone finally. "That's like hobby programming, right? Not really professional level work?" Marcus felt his patience wearing thin, but he kept his voice steady. "Open source projects include some of the most sophisticated software in the world. Linux, Android, and countless enterprise systems are built on open source foundations. My contributions have been to projects used by millions of people globally." Brad waved his hand like he was swatting away an annoying fly. Sure. "Look, Marcus, let me be honest with you. We have a lot of candidates for this position, people with extensive networks, strong reputations in the industry, connections to major companies. What makes you think you can compete with that level of candidate?" There it was, the clear message. "You don't belong here. You're not in the same league as our other candidates. Why are you even trying?" Marcus looked at Brad and Jessica for a long moment. He could see the smugness in their expressions. They thought they had put him in his place. They thought they had successfully discouraged him without being overtly racist. They probably did this to people all the time, using careful language that let them deny any prejudice if questioned later. "My network includes CTOs from dozens of major technology companies," Marcus said clearly. "I've been invited to speak at MIT, Stanford, and Carnegie Mellon. I've been featured in Forbes, Wired, and TechCrunch. I hold 3 patents in software design. I've built and led teams that created products used by millions of people. My connections in the industry are extensive and at the highest levels." He pulled out more documents from his portfolio as he spoke. Letters of recommendation from CEOs, photos of him speaking at major conferences, articles that mentioned his work. He laid them on the table one by one like playing cards. Brad and Jessica glanced at the documents with expressions that mixed confusion and annoyance. They did not want to be impressed. They did not want to be wrong about their initial judgment, so they simply chose not to believe what they were seeing. "Well, that's all very impressive on paper," Jessica said with clear skepticism in her voice. "But we have to be realistic about fit. Our clients have certain expectations about the people we send them. We need to make sure there's a cultural match, you understand?" Cultural match. Marcus knew that phrase well. It was code language. It meant we want people who look and think like us. It meant you're different and that makes us uncomfortable. "I understand perfectly," Marcus said with a slight smile. "Cultural fit is important. A company's culture says everything about its values and priorities." Brad started to stand up, clearly ready to end the interview. "Well, Marcus, thank you for coming in today. We have several more candidates to see this week. We'll be in touch if we want to move forward." It was a dismissal, a polite way of saying don't call us, we won't call you. The interview had lasted barely 20 minutes, and they had spent most of that time being dismissive and condescending. They had not asked about his actual achievements. They had not explored his vision or ideas. They had simply gone through the motions so they could check a box and move on. But Marcus did not stand up. He remained seated, his hands folded calmly on the table. "Actually," he said quietly, "before we finish, I have one question for you." Brad and Jessica both looked surprised. Candidates usually did not ask questions at this point. They usually thanked the interviewers and left quickly, grateful to escape the uncomfortable situation. "A question?" Brad said, sitting back down slowly. Sure. What's your question?" The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Brad and Jessica both froze. Their expressions shifted from dismissive confidence to confusion. They looked at each other, then back at Marcus, trying to understand what he was asking and why. "I'm sorry, what?" Brad said, forcing a small laugh. "I don't understand the question." Marcus leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed now. His entire demeanor had changed. The careful politeness was still there, but there was something else underneath it. Authority. Power. The bearing of someone who was used to being in control. "It's a simple question," Marcus said calmly. "Imagine right now that you discovered the person sitting across from you was not a job candidate at all. Imagine you learned that this person was actually the CEO of a major corporation, someone with real power and influence in the technology industry, someone who could affect your careers and your company's reputation. How would that change the way you just conducted this interview?" Jessica's face went pale. Her fingers stopped moving on her tablet. She set it down slowly on the table, her hand shaking slightly. "I don't think I understand what you're implying," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Marcus smiled, but it was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had been patient for a very long time and was now finished being patient. "Let me be more direct," he said. "I heard everything you said in the waiting area, about diversity hire interviews, about checking boxes, about how my resume probably looks better than I actually am, about giving it 10 minutes before you wrap up and get back to your real work, about candidates who actually matter." The color completely drained from Brad's face. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Jessica's eyes went wide and she gripped the edge of the table. That was. Brad started, then stopped. He seemed to be trying to calculate what to say, what excuse might work. "We didn't mean anything by that. We were just joking around. You have to understand, we talk like that all the time. It doesn't mean anything." "Doesn't mean anything," Marcus repeated slowly. He picked up his portfolio and opened it. He pulled out a business card and placed it on the table between them. "Let me tell you what does mean something." Brad and Jessica both leaned forward to look at the card. The text was simple and elegant. It read, Marcus Thompson, Chief Technology Officer, Quantum Innovations. Below that was contact information and the company logo. Quantum Innovations, Marcus continued in the same calm voice, is currently opening a new office here in Seattle. We're expanding our operations and will be hiring approximately 300 people over the next 18 months. Engineers, project managers, analysts, designers, all levels from entry position to senior leadership. He paused and let that information sink in. Both Brad and Jessica stared at the business card like it was a bomb that might explode. To support this expansion, Marcus went on, we need a recruitment partner, a firm that can help us find top talent and represent our company values in the market, a firm that understands the importance of diversity, inclusion, and treating every candidate with respect and dignity. That's why I'm here today. Jessica made a small sound, almost like a gasp. Brad's hands were shaking now. This was never a job interview for me, Marcus said. I already have a job, a very good job. This was an evaluation interview. I was evaluating your company to determine if you were the kind of partner we want to work with, to see if you share our values and our commitment to fair treatment of all people. He let the silence stretch out for a moment. The room was completely quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sounds of the office outside. I should tell you, Marcus continued, that I've done this same evaluation with 4 other recruitment firms over the past 3 weeks. I visited them all under similar circumstances, presenting myself as a job candidate to see how they would treat me. 3 of those firms passed the test. They treated me with respect, asked intelligent questions, and evaluated me based on my qualifications. They will be competing for our business. Brad found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Mr. Thompson, please. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. If you could just give us another chance to show you what our company is really about. Marcus held up his hand, stopping him. There's no misunderstanding, Brad. I saw exactly what your company is really about. I saw it in the way you talked about me when you thought I couldn't hear. I saw it in the way you conducted this interview. I saw it in every dismissive question and every condescending assumption. This wasn't an accident or a bad day. This is who you are. Jessica was crying now, tears running down her face and smearing her makeup. Please, she said, her voice breaking. We have families. We have careers. This was just a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. Marcus looked at her with something that might have been pity. You're right that everyone makes mistakes, he said. But what you did today wasn't a mistake. A mistake is an accident, something you didn't mean to do. What you did was deliberate. You made conscious choices about how to treat me based on the color of my skin and your assumptions about what that meant. He stood up and gathered his portfolio. Brad and Jessica both stood up too, looking desperate and frightened. What will you do? Brad asked. His voice was shaking. Are you going to report us? Tell our company? Go public with this? Marcus looked at them both for a long moment. That depends, he said finally. I believe in giving people the opportunity to learn and grow. I believe in accountability and consequences, but also in redemption. So here's what's going to happen. He pulled out his phone and opened it to a document he had prepared earlier. I'm going to send a detailed report to your CEO, Robert Chen. I'm going to describe everything that happened today from what I heard in the waiting area to how this interview was conducted. I'm going to explain that I came here as a potential business partner, not as a job candidate. And I'm going to let Mr. Chen decide what to do with that information. No, please, Jessica said, reaching toward him but not quite touching him. Please don't do that. We'll lose our jobs. Our reputations will be destroyed. Marcus's expression hardened. Did you think about my reputation when you were mocking me in the waiting area? Did you consider how your treatment might affect my career or my dignity? Did you worry about the dozens or hundreds of other candidates who you've probably treated the same way? Neither of them could answer. They both looked at the floor, unable to meet his eyes. I thought not, Marcus said. He walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. Let me tell you something that I hope you'll remember. Every person who walks through that door for an interview is a human being with dreams, qualifications, and dignity. Every person deserves to be treated with respect and evaluated fairly, not because of what position they might hold or what connections they might have, but because it's the right thing to do. He opened the door and stepped into the hallway. Amy was standing there, and Marcus could tell from her expression that she had been listening, or perhaps had heard what happened from her desk. Her eyes were red, like she had been crying too. "Mr. Thompson," she said quietly. "I'm so sorry. I should have said something earlier. I should have stopped them or reported them before this. I've watched them do this to so many people, and I just stayed quiet because I needed my job. But that's not an excuse." Marcus looked at Amy and saw genuine remorse in her face. Unlike Brad and Jessica, who were sorry they got caught, Amy was sorry for her silence. "Amy," he said gently. "What's your last name?" "Nakamura," she said. "Amy Nakamura." Marcus pulled out another business card and wrote something on the back of it. He handed it to her. "Amy, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stand up for what's right, even when it costs us something. I hope you'll think about that." Amy looked at the card. On the back, Marcus had written his personal email address and a short message. "If you ever need a reference or want to talk about opportunities at a company that values integrity, contact me." Fresh tears spilled down Amy's cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Marcus walked back down the hallway toward the reception area. Behind him, he could hear Brad and Jessica's voices, panicked and desperate, probably already, trying to figure out how to cover their tracks or spin the situation. But it was too late for that. The truth was already out, and the consequences were already in motion. As Marcus rode the elevator back down to the lobby, he pulled out his phone. He had recorded the entire interview on a small device in his portfolio. It was legal in this state to record conversations as long as one party consented, and he had consented. He had clear audio of every dismissive question, every condescending tone, every inappropriate assumption. But more than that, he had the truth. And the truth, he had learned long ago, was the most powerful weapon against injustice. Marcus sat in his car in the parking lot for several minutes after leaving the building. His hands rested on the steering wheel, and he took deep, steady breaths. The anger and hurt he had controlled so carefully during the interview could finally surface now that he was alone. His jaw clenched, his eyes burned, but he did not let himself break down. Not yet. There was still work to do. He pulled out his laptop and opened it on the passenger seat. Using his phone as a hotspot, he connected to the internet and began writing. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as he typed a detailed email to Robert Chen, the CEO of Tech Forward Solutions. The email was professional but direct. It described everything that had happened, from what he overheard in the waiting area to how the interview was conducted. He attached relevant portions of the audio recording as evidence. Marcus explained who he was, why he had come to Tech Forward, and what he had been evaluating. He made it clear that this was not about revenge or trying to get anyone in trouble. It was about accountability and making sure the company knew what was happening in its own walls. He ended the email with a simple statement. A company is defined by how it treats people when no one is watching. He hit send and closed his laptop. Then he sat back and closed his eyes. The hard part was done. Now he would wait and see what happened next. Marcus drove home slowly, taking the long route that went along the water. He needed time to process everything before he faced his family. When he finally pulled into his driveway, Angela was watching from the window. She must have seen something in his expression because she met him at the door with worry in her eyes. "What happened?" she asked immediately. Marcus told her everything. They sat on the couch in their living room, and he described the whole experience from beginning to end. Angela held his hand and listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "I'm so sorry," she said finally. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. But I'm proud of you for how you handled it." "I almost lost it," Marcus admitted. "When they asked if I was comfortable with technology, like I was some kid who had never used a computer. When they suggested I only got into Stanford because of affirmative action, I wanted to stand up and walk out. Or worse, I wanted to yell at them and tell them exactly what I thought of their ignorance." "But you didn't," Angela said. "You stayed professional and let them show you exactly who they were." That took more strength than walking out would have. That evening, Marcus tried to relax and spend time with his children, but his mind kept returning to the interview. He wondered if Brad and Jessica had told their CEO what happened, or if they were trying to hide it. He wondered if Robert Chen would even respond to his email or if it would be ignored. The answer came sooner than he expected. At 8 o'clock that night, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something told him to answer. "Mr. Thompson?" a man's voice said. "This is Robert Chen. I'm the CEO of Tech Forward Solutions. I just read your email and I wanted to call you immediately." Marcus sat up straighter. "Mr. Chen, thank you for calling." "No, thank you for bringing this to my attention," Robert said. His voice was tight with anger, but Marcus could tell the anger was not directed at him. "I've already pulled the security footage from our office and listened to your recording. I'm absolutely horrified by what I've seen and heard. This is not what my company stands for, or at least it's not what I thought we stood for." They talked for almost an hour. Robert asked detailed questions about what happened and expressed genuine shock at Brad and Jessica's behavior. He explained that there had been some complaints before, vague concerns about the company's culture, but nothing this concrete or serious. "I'm launching a full investigation starting tomorrow," Robert said. "I want to know if this is an isolated incident or if it's part of a bigger problem. And I want you to know that there will be consequences." "Real consequences?" "I appreciate that," Marcus said. "But you should know this is not just about Brad and Jessica. This is about a culture that allows this behavior to happen. I noticed your leadership team lacks diversity. I saw the photos on your walls showing 20 years of company history, with almost no people of color in any of them. This runs deeper than 2 bad recruiters." Robert was quiet for a moment. "You're right," he said finally, "and that's on me. I built this company, and I let this culture develop. I thought we were doing okay because we had policies and training. But policies on paper don't mean anything if the reality is different. I have a lot of work to do." Marcus respected the honesty. Many CEOs would have made excuses or tried to minimize the problem. Robert seemed to genuinely understand the scope of what was wrong. The next morning, Marcus woke up to dozens of messages on his phone. Several were from colleagues in the tech industry asking if he was okay, and if the rumors they heard were true. Confused, Marcus opened his LinkedIn app and immediately understood. Amy had quit her job at Tech Forward, and she had written a public resignation letter. Her post was already being shared thousands of times. In it, Amy described working at Tech Forward for 3 years and watching as the company repeatedly discriminated against candidates of color. She described Brad and Jessica's behavior as part of a pattern, not an isolated incident. She explained that she had stayed silent for too long because she needed her job and was afraid of retaliation. Then Amy described what happened yesterday with Marcus. She did not mention his name, but she detailed the situation and how ashamed she felt for not speaking up earlier. She ended her post by saying, "I can no longer work for a company that treats people this way. I can no longer be silent when I see injustice. I'm resigning effective immediately, and I encourage anyone else at Tech Forward who has witnessed similar behavior to speak up. Silence protects the wrong people." Within hours, Amy's post had gone viral. It was being shared across LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. News outlets were picking up the story. The hashtag Tech Forward accountability started trending. Current and former employees of Tech Forward began sharing their own stories in the comments, describing a culture of discrimination and prejudice that went back years. Marcus's phone rang again. It was Robert Chen. "Have you seen what's happening?" Robert asked. His voice sounded exhausted. "I have," Marcus said. "My board of directors is meeting in an emergency session this afternoon. The media is calling nonstop. Our clients are asking questions. Mr. Thompson, my company is in crisis and we deserve it. But I want to do better. I need to do better. Would you be willing to help us?" Marcus thought carefully before answering. Part of him wanted to say no, to let Tech Forward deal with the mess they had created. But another part of him remembered his larger purpose. He did not do this just to punish 2 recruiters. He did it to create change. "I might be willing to help," Marcus said slowly, "but only under certain conditions. First, Brad and Jessica need to be terminated immediately. No second chances, no performance improvement plans. What they did was unacceptable, and there need to be real consequences." "Already done," Robert said. "I fired them both first thing this morning." "Second," Marcus continued, You need to hire an independent firm to conduct a full audit of your hiring practices and company culture. Not a whitewash, but a real investigation that looks at patterns and problems honestly. Agreed, Robert said. Third, you need to commit to real change, not just public relations. That means diversifying your leadership team, changing your recruitment practices, and creating accountability systems. And it means being transparent about your progress. I understand, Robert said, and I'm committed to all of that. But there's one more thing I want to ask. Amy Nakamura, the receptionist who quit. She showed real courage in speaking up. Would you consider reaching out to her? I'd like to offer her a position back at the company, but in a new role. Head of Ethics and Inclusion Oversight. She would report directly to me and have the authority to investigate complaints and recommend actions. Marcus smiled for the first time in days. That's a good idea. Yes, I'll reach out to her, but the offer should come from you directly, and she should have the freedom to refuse without any pressure. Of course, Robert agreed. After they hung up, Marcus sat at his desk and thought about what to do next. The story was already public thanks to Amy's post, but it did not include Marcus's name or company. He could stay anonymous if he wanted, or he could speak up and use his platform to make the message even stronger. Marcus opened his laptop and began writing a LinkedIn post of his own. He titled it, "What Happens When We Judge Books by Their Covers? My Experience with Discrimination in Tech Recruiting." In the post, Marcus told his story. He explained that he was the unnamed executive in Amy's post. He described the experience in detail, including the things Brad and Jessica said and how they conducted the interview. He talked about why he had gone to Tech Forward in the first place, to evaluate them as a potential partner. But Marcus's post was not just about calling out bad behavior. He used it to start a larger conversation about unconscious bias, the importance of diversity in hiring, and how companies can do better. He shared specific suggestions and offered to talk with other organizations about improving their practices. He ended his post with these words, "This happened to me, someone with credentials and a position of power. Imagine how often it happens to people who don't have those advantages. Imagine the talent we lose, the innovation we miss, and the people we hurt because of our biases and assumptions. We can do better. We must do better." Marcus hit the publish button and closed his laptop. Within minutes, the post started getting reactions. Within an hour, it had thousands of likes and hundreds of comments. By evening, it had reached hundreds of thousands of people. The story was everywhere now. Major news outlets were covering it. Television programs were discussing it. Marcus's phone would not stop ringing with interview requests. His story had touched something deep in people, especially those who had experienced similar treatment, but never had the platform or power to speak about it publicly. That night, Marcus sat with his family for dinner. His daughter asked him about all the attention and why people were talking about him online. "Daddy did something important," Marcus told his daughter, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes people treat other people unfairly because of the way they look. When that happened to me, I spoke up about it. And now lots of people are talking about how we can all treat each other better." His daughter thought about this for a moment. "Like when Tommy said I couldn't play soccer because I'm a girl?" Marcus nodded. "Exactly like that. And what did you do?" "I told the teacher, and then I scored 3 goals in the game to prove him wrong," she said proudly. Marcus smiled and hugged her. "That's my girl. Never let anyone tell you what you can't do." Over the next few days, the story continued to grow. Robert Chen held a press conference where he took full responsibility for the culture at Tech Forward. He announced Brad and Jessica's termination publicly and detailed the changes the company would make. He brought Amy on stage with him and announced her new position as head of ethics and inclusion. Amy spoke briefly, her voice shaking but determined about the importance of speaking up against injustice. But Robert did not stop there. He announced that Tech Forward would be publishing regular transparency reports about their hiring practices, including demographic data on candidates interviewed and hired. He committed to diversifying the leadership team within 6 months. He set up an anonymous reporting system for employees to report discrimination without fear of retaliation. Most importantly, he did not ask for forgiveness or praise. He simply said, "We failed. We hurt people, and now we have to do the hard work of changing. Judge us by our actions going forward, not by our promises today." Marcus watched the press conference and felt cautiously hopeful. Words were easy. Actions would be harder. But at least Tech Forward was moving in the right direction. Meanwhile, Brad and Jessica were facing their own consequences. Within days, their names were public knowledge. The tech community was small and well-connected. Other companies doing background checks would find the news stories and social media posts. Recruiters talked to each other and shared information about problematic candidates. Brad tried to defend himself in a LinkedIn post, claiming he was being unfairly targeted and that his comments were taken out of context. The post backfired spectacularly. Hundreds of people commented, many sharing their own negative experiences with him. Former colleagues revealed that his behavior with Marcus was not unusual. The post was eventually deleted, but screenshots had already spread everywhere. Jessica tried a different approach. She posted a tearful video apology, saying she was ashamed of her behavior and wanted to learn and grow. But her apology felt hollow to many people because she only apologized after facing consequences, not before. Some people in the comments appreciated her acknowledgement, but most pointed out that real change requires more than words. Several companies that had been considering hiring her quietly withdrew their job offers. Both Brad and Jessica found themselves effectively blacklisted from the tech recruitment industry. Companies did not want to be associated with the scandal. Their professional networks dried up. Months later, Brad would end up working in a completely different field, far from the tech industry where he once thrived. Jessica would spend a year in therapy working through her biases before eventually finding work at a small firm that specialized in diversity training, where she would spend her time teaching others not to make the mistakes she had made. But the impact of Marcus's story went far beyond two terminated recruiters. His LinkedIn post sparked a movement. Other executives and professionals began sharing their own stories of discrimination in hiring. The hashtag #ShareYourHiringStory trended for weeks. Thousands of people, especially people of color and women, described experiences where they were dismissed, underestimated, or mistreated during job interviews. The stories were heartbreaking. A black woman with a PhD in computer science asked if she could type. A Latino engineer with 15 years of experience told his accent was hard to understand, even though he was born in California. An Asian American candidate asked where she was really from multiple times. A woman in a wheelchair asked if she was sure she could handle the physical demands of a desk job. Companies were forced to look at their hiring practices. Some were defensive, but many recognized they had problems. HR departments started implementing blind resume reviews, where names and photos were removed during initial screening. Interview training programs were overhauled to address unconscious bias. Some companies started recording interviews to review for discriminatory behavior. Marcus received hundreds of requests to speak about his experience. He carefully chose which invitations to accept, focusing on venues where he could make the most impact. He spoke at HR conferences, university business schools, and corporate leadership retreats. His message was always the same: treat every person with dignity and respect, judge people by their qualifications and character, and create systems that reduce bias rather than reinforce it. 3 months after the incident, Marcus received a call from Amy. She was settling into her new role at Tech Forward and wanted to thank him for changing her life. "I never thought I could make a real difference," Amy told him. "I was just a receptionist. I thought I had to stay quiet and do what I was told. But you showed me that speaking up matters. That silence is a choice, and it's often the wrong choice." "You showed yourself that," Marcus corrected gently. "I just gave you a business card. You made the decision to quit and speak out. That was all you." Amy laughed softly. "Maybe, but thank you anyway. And I want you to know things are really changing here. We've hired 3 new people to our leadership team, all from underrepresented backgrounds. We've completely redesigned our interview process. We've had dozens of employees come forward with concerns that we're addressing. It's not perfect yet, but it's so much better." "That's what accountability looks like," Marcus said. "I'm proud of you." 6 months after the incident, Robert Chen contacted Marcus again. Tech Forward had completed its internal review and had made significant changes. Robert asked if Marcus would reconsider them as a recruitment partner for Quantum Innovation's Seattle office. Marcus thought about it carefully. He discussed it with his leadership team at Quantum. They reviewed Tech Forward's progress, interviewed Amy about the changes, and looked at their transparency reports. The data showed real improvement. Their candidate pool was more diverse, Their interview-to-hire ratios had evened out across demographics, and employee feedback showed a healthier culture. "We'll give you a trial period," Marcus told Robert. 6 months. "If your performance matches your promises, we'll continue the partnership. But the moment we see backsliding or problems, we're done. No second chances." "Fair enough," Robert said. "We'll earn your trust," and they did. Tech Forward proved to be an excellent partner. The recruiters they sent candidates who were evaluated fairly on qualifications. They found talented people from diverse backgrounds. They represented Quantum's values well in the marketplace. A year after the incident, Marcus was invited to give a keynote speech at the National HR Conference in Chicago. The auditorium held 3,000 people, and every seat was filled. As Marcus walked onto the stage, he looked out at the sea of faces and felt the weight of the moment. "A year ago," he began, "I walked into a job interview that changed my life. But not in the way you might think. I didn't get a new job. I didn't learn a new skill. What I learned was the power of truth and the importance of speaking up." He told the story again, even though many people in the audience already knew it. But he told it in more detail, including parts he had not shared publicly before. He talked about sitting in that waiting room, hearing those words and feeling the familiar weight of prejudice settle on his shoulders. He talked about the anger and hurt he felt, but also about the choice he made to respond with dignity rather than rage. "Here's what I want you to understand," Marcus said, his voice filling the auditorium. "This was not about me getting revenge on 2 recruiters. This was about shining a light on a problem that exists everywhere in our industry. Every day, talented people are overlooked because of their race, their gender, their age, their accent, their appearance. Every day, companies lose out on great employees because of bias and assumptions." He paused and looked around the room. "But here's the good news. We can change this. We can create better systems. We can train ourselves to recognize our biases. We can hold each other accountable. And we can build workplaces where everyone gets a fair chance to show their worth." The audience applauded, but Marcus held up his hand. "Don't applaud me. I want you to do something harder. I want you to go back to your companies and look honestly at your hiring practices. I want you to ask the difficult questions. Are we giving everyone a fair chance? Are our interview processes designed to find the best people or to confirm our biases? Are we comfortable with the diversity of our workforce, or do we need to do better?" He ended his speech with a challenge. 6 months from now, I want to hear from you. Not about intentions or plans, but about actions and results. Show me the changes you made. Show me the candidates you hired that you might have overlooked before. Show me that this conversation led to real change, not just nice words. The standing ovation lasted for several minutes, but Marcus knew applause did not matter. Actions mattered. Results mattered. In the months and years that followed, Marcus continued to advocate for fair hiring practices. He served on boards focused on diversity in tech. He mentored young professionals from underrepresented backgrounds. He worked with companies to improve their culture and practices. Amy thrived in her new role and eventually became Vice President of Ethics and Compliance at Tech Forward. She built a nationally recognized program that other companies studied and copied. She spoke at conferences and wrote articles about creating ethical workplace cultures. Tech Forward became known as a leader in fair hiring practices. Their transparency reports were published quarterly and became a model for the industry. They won awards for workplace culture and diversity. More importantly, they hired great people and helped other companies do the same. Brad and Jessica's stories were more complicated. Brad eventually found peace working as a teacher at a community college, far from the corporate world where he once sought power and status. He rarely talked about his past and kept a low profile. Jessica, after her year of therapy and education, became a genuine advocate for diversity. She worked at a nonprofit that trained companies on unconscious bias. Some people questioned her sincerity, but over time her actions spoke louder than her past mistakes. As for Marcus, he continued to lead Quantum Innovations to greater success. The Seattle office opened and flourished. The company's commitment to diversity became one of its strongest assets, attracting top talent from all backgrounds. Marcus received numerous awards and recognition, but he always said the same thing in his acceptance speeches. "I'm not special. I'm just someone who had the platform and the position to speak up when something wrong happened. The real heroes are the people who speak up even when they have nothing to gain and everything to lose. The Amy Nakamuras of the world, who risk their jobs to stand up for what's right. Those are the people we should celebrate. 5 years after the incident, Marcus was invited back to Stanford to give a commencement speech. He stood at the podium looking at hundreds of graduates, many of them young people of color who would soon enter the workforce. Some of you, he told them, will face the kind of discrimination I faced. People will underestimate you. They will make assumptions about your abilities based on your appearance. They will treat you unfairly. He paused and made eye contact with students throughout the audience. When that happens, you have choices. You can let it defeat you. You can respond with anger, or you can respond with dignity, strength, and a commitment to creating change. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. Marcus smiled. I chose the third path, and it made all the difference. The graduates applauded, but Marcus hoped they understood the deeper message. Change was possible, justice was possible, but it required courage, persistence, and a willingness to speak truth to power. It required people to stand up even when it was uncomfortable, even when it was risky, even when it would be easier to stay silent. As Marcus left the stage that day, he thought about how far things had come since that interview 5 years ago. The tech industry was far from perfect. Discrimination still existed. Bias still affected hiring decisions. But there was progress. Real, measurable progress. Companies were more conscious of their practices. More people were willing to speak up. More voices were being heard. And it all started with one powerful question in an interview room. A question that changed careers, transformed a company, and sparked a movement. A question that reminded everyone that dignity matters, that respect matters, and that the way we treat people when we think no one is watching reveals our true character. Marcus Thompson had asked that question not knowing where it would lead. But looking back, he would not change a thing. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply tell the truth and trust that the truth will lead to justice.